I've got like a document with my notes to your questions, but
Yeah,
maybe we'll go through this first.
yeah, just go through it first.
All right. Let me just
Just to
see.
give a broad idea of why I sent this, it's
Oh,
more of a comparison to an alternative viewpoint that's maybe against Rand.
right.
Just has some similarities, but also goes in a different direction. Especially because this is not really about objectivity. Nietzsche doesn't exactly believe in objectivity. So
Yeah.
as he's kind of going on about like there's no objective meaning to these things, they're just creations, with the similarity is that he agrees they're creations. He just thinks that they can't refer to reality. And they're good things, but he doesn't see it as a way of helping you think. So I'm giving a contrasting viewpoint.
I got that, he did keep speaking of things in themselves and out there. And I do know that I think I did look up Kant published Critique of Pure Reason late 18th century. So I wonder if,
Yeah.
even though I didn't say Nietzsche was influenced by him, isn't that idea of things out there
Yes.
on their own, not influenced by the nerve sensations, which Nietzsche goes on about. Do you reckon he got that from him?
I'm 100% sure. Like
Yeah,
he's
okay.
like criticizing Kant directly.
Oh, he's criticizing Kant. I thought that's what
Well,
he
not
was.
well. He refers to Kant, and he's always says something mean about Kant, usually about things in themselves, and he never likes it. So usually, anytime he mentions things in themselves, he would probably either mean Plato or Kant, as far as I
Okay.
recall when he uses those terms.
Okay. So he seems to think knowing is just, I guess, because it's subjective, he calls it, it's not truth. There's no truth. That's sort of what he's saying. And truth is only a social convention to help us from destroying each other, and that we use to, if to prevent someone from using concepts in a way that destroy us. And so we want them to conform to our concepts. Something like that's what I got. Um,
It's about like conforming, is how he's kind of seeing it.
right.
Like they kind of stifle thinking, is what he's kind of saying. That he's also saying that they're subjective constructions, and he's saying like there's no necessary fact of the matter of how we put these things. It's just a story we tell, or it's a way we assemble these thoughts in a way that makes sense.
Do you think he influenced Wittgenstein as well? Because that just sounds a bit like there's some Kant in here, and then there's all the nominalists who are later like, well, it's all just similarities and differences and personal
Um,
metaphors based on our sensations, and that we
I'm
forget the
not sure.
differences. Okay,
Probably
all right.
more just the existentialists.
What this was cool. I like the introduction, but uh, so he talks about us being on this star of us being clever beasts on this star who came up with this concept of knowing. Um,
Yeah,
and he calls it an arrogant and mendacious minute of world history, but it was only a minute. And what does this mean? After nature had drawn a few breaths, the star cooled and congealed, and the clever beast had to die. What's your take on that?
it seems like metaphorically he's saying like the initial birth of Earth and the sun is like this extravagant, exciting time. Then
Yeah,
it cooled down, relaxed, and settled, and it's no longer as exciting and clever. It's not filled with that, like burning with the energy of the star. Now it's kind of like
right. And it's
settled
just
down.
reason, people coming up with
Yes,
concepts. The
yes,
scientist in his hut. Okay.
yes.
Uh, And when it was all over with the human intellect, nothing will have happened, for this intellect has no additional mission which would lead it beyond human life. I found that interesting. Why is he?
Yeah.
It's almost like he's acknowledging that the intellect is just for life. I don't, but at the same time, he doesn't think it is.
In a
What was
way,
your?
I think so, because like, and when it's all over, the human intellect, nothing will have happened. I mean, it's almost like contrasting, like, um, they believe it's aimless and well, um, Yeah, in a way, he does seem to acknowledge that a little bit. Realistic, and like no additional mission, which would lead it beyond human life. Like, yeah, he's in a way starting with like the truth and the limitations. Like, in truth, it like just tries to conform us, but it's also nothing more than it doesn't go beyond human life. He's
Right.
paying attention, the tension between these ideas.
Right. There's probably a wider context as well that I'm not aware of, religion and philosophy wise, that might help
Yes.
understanding this. And then he says, I guess that fits in with this. There is nothing so reprehensible and unimportant in nature that it would not immediately swell up like a balloon at the slightest puff of this power of knowing. So,
I
yeah.
think it's also criticizing the idea of like disinterested thinking, like objective as in outside the human mind. Like there's this knowing and truth outside of ourselves. It's like he's saying it's like kind of ridiculous. Like if it's nothing's more representable than um, there's nothing that's unimportant in nature that just gains energy or power or worth just by knowing it. I mean, knowing something outside of ourselves is like it doesn't make sense. It's like he's saying it's ridiculous and it's actually reprehensible in his mind.
Oh, I interpreted this. He's talking about people being reprehensible because they think they know something. Sort of like, maybe I didn't read this right.
It is
It would not
awkwardly
swell up
phrased
like a
because
balloon at the slightest puff of this. So I thought it like beings, humans in nature that or any animal that would not swell up like proudly at the power of knowing. But I don't know.
well, he's referring to these that reasoning like the concepts outside of ourselves or this pure knowledge or whatever we want to call that. He's saying there's nothing so reprehensible and important in nature. He's describing those sort of concepts. There's like what's the most unimportant thing in nature? What are unimportant things that have no meaning to anyone? They just exist in themselves. He's saying that thing he's referring to is there's nothing like that in nature that would swell up just from the power of being known, at the power of knowing. Knowing it doesn't give it some special value or anything beyond what it is.
Mhm. But
It's kind
it
of
would
his,
not. He's saying it would swell up. It would. There is nothing that would not. So everything that is reprehensible and unimportant would swell up like a balloon at the slightest puff of this
oh, you're
power of
right.
knowing.
There is nothing that it would not immediately.
Yeah.
Let's see. Hmm.
And I think it's related to this next passage. And just as every porter, I don't know what a porter is, but maybe some kind of fisherman or something, or boatman,
Yeah.
wants to have an admirer, whatever that means. So even the proudest of men, the philosopher, supposes that he sees all sides, the eyes of the universe telescopically focused upon his action and thought. I don't, yeah.
Yeah. So he's saying the philosopher is the one who like these like Kant, really, just to have an image in mind who he's referring to, or the sort of philosopher he means. Like
Oh,
they're seeing everything at once, that their power of objectivity is outside of themselves and they can see anything in the universe through this power of knowing that they have, through their sense of objectivity outside and beyond themselves. And it's like you're reifying or making godly just the notion of knowing of things outside ourselves. And he goes on to say this is basically like hubris and ridiculous to think this way, but this is what the philosopher thinks he can do. And he's saying that's kind of dumb.
what's reifying? You say reifying
Um,
knowing.
to make something abstract into something real, like as if it's concrete, even though it's not.
What, what do you mean?
Like knowledge isn't a concrete thing, but
Yeah.
reifying would be treating it as if it's concrete, like literally concrete, like a platonic form or something. You're
Okay.
reifying the
I
abstract.
guess.
You're making it real, even though it's abstract.
So what would be in this example of reifying knowledge outside ourselves? What's that?
Like just knowing it impacts it. Just knowing these things makes it grow. Just I don't want to make too fine a point on it.
Yeah, okay.
Just to say that he seems to be criticizing a philosopher that takes this perspective of this pure objectivity, this pure sense of knowing, and he doesn't think it's helpful.
All right. Oh, okay, I see. He's talking about deceiving them concerning the value of existence, the value of knowing. What do I ask here? I guess, what did he see the role of reason as? I guess disconnected from survival now that because he's talking about the value of existence, right? And a tool of deception is another thing.
Pride concerning the knowing is blinding, thus deceit.
Well, he does say detaining them a minute within existence. I think that's what I got caught on. With intellect, which was certainly allotted to the most unfortunate, delicate, ephemeral beings, merely as a device for detaining them a minute within existence. That's what I was like, what does he mean there?
Isn't
For without this addition, they would have every reason to flee this existence as quickly as Lessing's sun. I don't know. I guess that's some kind of mythological reference, but
yes, I think so.
But what does he mean here? Like, is he acknowledging that reason has a role in survival? Like,
not quite. It is remarkable that this was brought about by the intellect. That philosopher's perspective is brought by the intellect. It's remarkable because, like, it's most important. But the intellect, which was it's an intellect which has been given to the most unfortunate, delicate, and ephemeral beings. Was only given to them as a device to detain them within a minute of existence. Oh, I guess like intellect is kind of like meant to keep them on grounded to the earth, and so it's remarkable that they don't just kill themselves because they've seen like it doesn't seem like existence has any value, but it does somehow. The intellect was supposed to ground them, so it's remarkable how they're still grounded.
What do you mean? I don't understand. It's supposed to. That I don't follow. It's supposed to ground them, and then it's remarkable. How does it's remarkable follow from? It's supposed to. And what does it mean to ground them?
Because the way they treated the intellect, the intellect brought about this thinking of the philosopher as detached from Earth, detached from the world, just everywhere all at once, objectively outside themselves. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Like that's what it became.
Mm-hmm.
And it's strange how it got there when it was a device allowing them to, detaining them within a minute within existence.
But here he's saying without this addition, they would have every reason to flee this existence. So it seems like without the intellect.
Yeah, I think so, yes.
So that's the opposite of what you're saying, though.
Let me reread that sentence. It's hard to interpret that sentence. So yes,
yeah,
I'll say
a lot
that
of this stuff is hard to because it's.
So I'll start with yes. This intellect does give them a reason to exist to some degree. I think you're right about that. Like, there's something about this way of thinking, something about this myth we tell ourselves, or the way we lie to ourselves, can be actually. It seems to be useful somehow.
Oh yeah, here he states the pride lies like a blinding fog over the eyes. The pride connected with the knowing and sensing is a blinding fog, deceiving them concerning the value of existence. It's still bizarre because like he's saying this intellect keeps them in existence, but then right now he's just saying it deceives them of the value of existence. And it seems to contradict because it's like without their intellect, they would flee existence as quickly as Lessing's sun. And yet their intellect deceives them of the value of existence. So that's strange.
Yeah, I'm trying to It's hard to understand the first sentence.
That's
Yeah, the
contradictory to me,
translation.
isn't it? That doesn't make sense because, like, they see value in existence, whether through deception or otherwise, because of their intellect. And if they didn't, they would flee this existence as quickly as a lessening sun. But the same pride connected with this knowing and sensing of the intellect is that same thing that is deceiving them concerning the value of their existence. So they value existence for untrue I don't know what he's talking about here, actually.
It is kind of contradictory. That's the difficult part about this part of the paper, is just because it seems to me he's trying to identify what kind of intellect has been brought about in this day and age, or what has been brought about through this detached way of thinking um, that deceives people about the existence. It's inherently deceptive. Whatever we tell ourselves is deceptive. It's not the truth about reality.
Anyway, I see it as this passage is contradictory to me, but we can just move on. So
yeah, let's just continue on from there.
Okay. Dissimulation. I don't know what that word's, but I think that's faking, right?
Yeah, or pretending that how it's not.
Okay,
Like dissimulate, like if you imagine reality, if you use imagination, it's not simulating reality exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think I remember this. So I read this as, so he is almost acknowledging a role for reason, because he's saying here the intellect unfolds its principal powers in dissimulation. So in lying, I guess he calls it.
Yes, he calls it lying.
Deception. And that allows for a weaker, less robust individual, someone without muscles. Since they've been denied the chance to wage the battle of existence with horns or sharp teeth or beasts of prey. So he's almost saying that intellect is what somehow allows them to survive. I guess he seems to view it as taking advantage of other men, and that's how they survive. But he is almost saying there's this role that intellect plays, which is for weak individuals and their deceptions. That's how I interpret this.
I think he's even saying that man himself is weak compared to, say, a lion. Like, right. A lion is not going to wage battle for existence with sharp teeth, like a strong sort of sense. So man uses art of dissimulation, this art of lying to himself about the truth of things. He just lies to himself.
Okay. This is isn't this implicitly like recognizing that the role of reason in survival?
I think so.
But
but what?
But how does what I'm curious about when I was reading this whole thing is, how does he even get to this point? Like, how does he come up in his head? Oh, okay. When we put animals in pen, we're using deception. Like, how does he even get to this? Like, where does all this come from? Intellect is lying. It seems like he's thinking in terms of metaphors somehow. Like, he's just looked at a few conversations between people, and suddenly he's developed this big abstraction of intellect as a lie. But I don't get how he didn't get here from observation, right? Like, this is just, he just makes this stuff up.
I think you're right about metaphor, because he does get into metaphor. Like he's kind of getting at, like, metaphor is the way we get at these ideas, that there's just a power of metaphor, and these lies we tell ourselves. And metaphors aren't truth. So in a way, he's saying, like, lies are ways of existing within the world and finding power within the world. Like, even he's saying that, yes, we lie, but we lie to ourselves with our concepts, but that's a good thing. Like, that's how we take hold of the world.
So he basically, go on, sorry.
I would say a lot of it comes from thinking about Greek philosophy and art, because just before this, he included this at the end of a book about art, and a lot of it I think had to do with like seeing the value in this passionate art the ancient Greeks would make, and the coolness of reason kind of detracting from that. So he's kind of getting at the idea, at least from art, that reason kind of cools things down and kind of hides the passion underneath it. And
Okay, that was the context then, right? The art.
yeah, so that's where he's coming from when he first developed these ideas. And he's trying to
Okay.
acknowledge like everything in the world, whatever we think about, we've created. It's not the truth. We don't find a concept and that's the truth outside of ourselves. It's something that we've created.
Right.
And that's what he's
But
trying to get at.
so I didn't catch him making fun of Kant. I actually thought he bought into this idea of truth in itself outside of
No.
humans, and he part of this whole thing is implicit recognition of that. But we can't get at it anyway, so let's just party and use deception and create all kinds of metaphors. That I thought that that was the Kantian influence on him. But
No,
you're
I
saying,
think he's saying he's saying it's stupid because it's all
oh,
ridiculous. Therefore, let's reject it. They're wrong
I didn't.
anyway.
Okay, I didn't read that in there, so that's
And he's saying
interesting.
that even they are just lying to themselves, that they've created deception about reality. He's trying to say, despite all their, oh, we're outside of existence where we've got the truth. It's like, but no, you guys don't. You're just like the rest of us. You're not like beyond or other you. But then it gets confusing because he's saying the unfortunate. That's what he's saying, unfortunate, delicate for all beings. These philosophers who think in terms of things in themselves, they're unfortunate. He doesn't think well of them.
Well, okay, cool. I must have missed that when I read it. So we'll get to that. The other thing
Yeah.
I want to know is, I guess that, it sounds like he developed these ideas in a very philosophic context, like probably
Yes.
in conversation with all these other philosophers.
Yes.
Because when I think of like using the intellect as deception, I'm like, it's almost like, and I'm not saying he did this because obviously this is, you have to recognize the intelligence. But like, it seems like to me, it's just so, okay, look at a Venus flytrap. Uses deception to catch a fly. Therefore, our intellect is deception. Like, I just don't get what observations does someone make to jump to say that, or what context and conditions are necessary in addition to the observations for someone to say intellect is deception. Because to me, that equation is confusing. Like, unless I'm looking at specific isolated aspects of reality, like a thief or a general or maybe back then historically, that's what, it was, there was more force, or Venus flytrap. But there's such small aspects of reality versus, say, a farmer. Um, Obviously I've got a modern context, so I'm trying not to use that. But let's say a farmer putting animals in a pen and stuff like that, and growing wheat. Like, I'm just, how does someone even get to this point of saying, all of intellect is deception?
Um, the hard thing about Nietzsche is that he's not always making a distinct, clear argument. It's not like Rand where she's specific. In a way, a lot of this is just provoking your thinking. And if you think, well, how could somebody come up with this? Like, that's kind of what he wants you to think about. Like, why would someone even just start? We think of it as, hey, that's absurd. But then he's trying to get you to think that, like, well, maybe you are lying to yourself, or maybe there really is an aspect of creating things that he's trying to just point out ways that he thinks individuals aren't thinking outside themselves, nor could they. It doesn't make sense and it's absurd in his
Okay,
mind.
I must have missed that because I didn't get it. But here he talks about, okay, so is he saying these same people who are deceiving, flattering, a continuous fluttering around the solitary flame of vanity, is he saying that they are deeply immersed in illusions and dream images? Their eyes merely glide over the surface of things and see forms. Is this what you're saying, where he's making fun of
This might not be making fun of it
Kant?
directly, but you can know this is probably referring to Plato, because he's saying the forms. And he's saying like they are so immersed in their lives themselves, they glide over the images of things and see forms, like things in themselves. Things, that's what we put in like scare quotes, I think. Nowhere, our senses lead nowhere to the truth. They're not using their senses. They don't care about stimuli. And it's almost like saying that they've been so flattered by their vanity, they're not even connected to reality anymore. That they don't even see life or anything. It's just they're not connected to anything.
Oh, okay. I didn't see. I must have missed that he was jabbing at them. He's just like, I thought he was actually saying that this is all we can do. We just grope at the back of things, and so we might as well just have a party. That I must have misread it. But
Yeah,
you're
and they're
saying,
content. Yeah, in a way, he's just describing their thought process. Like these guys are so
okay,
immersed in the lives themselves, and they're satisfied just to grope at the backs of things.
okay, got it. Right.
And they're happy with that. And he's saying why would they? That's terrible.
And he's saying that's vanity.
Yeah, thinking they're better. Like you think you're so great for doing this. Like no, not really. That's kind of what Nietzsche's saying. Like they're filled with vanity.
He talks here about deception, flattering, lying, deluding, talking behind the back, putting up a false front, living in borrowed splendor, wearing a mask, all of this secondhand type stuff. And he calls that a fluttering around the solitary flame of vanity. What is, I don't, vanity is like concerned with the superficial, right?
Yeah.
And so
He is just saying
that's
that.
what the role of the intellect is in his mind. It's for flattery, lying, deluding, putting up false fronts, and living in borrowed splendor.
Not reason intellect per se, just that those philosophers who deal in dissimulation of this pureness are really just operating as deception, flattering, lying, deluding, all that stuff, and it amounts to just flattery to themselves. That's why they do what he's suggesting. Like they're just flattering themselves, even though it doesn't do anything. Even though they're content to go nowhere near the truth, they're content just to grope at things.
At the back of things.
Yeah, and he's saying these guys like he's pointing out he's saying it's nothing but vanity. They don't actually get close to the truth, and there's nothing there.
Right. And then he says, it's less comprehensible than how an honest and pure drive for truth could have arisen among them. That I didn't see, I must have misread this. I thought he meant that the only reason for truth is to prevent social disorder and prevent us from war and murder. And then so we want to start living with people, we better agree to certain concepts. That
I think Nietzsche tries to be ironic, and it can make him hard to understand sometimes, because you don't always know when is he just trying to say it just to make fun of it. Half the things he says is to make fun of somebody. So that's the difficulty in reading him.
Well, to me, that would just mean you really need to know the context well. I don't know what the intellectual historical that probably has a big impact on this then, because how do you know what he's making fun of if you don't know what the...
Yeah, that's why it's important to talk about. I think like you can't go into it blind usually. You have to know a thing or two. Like, and that's why I was going over it with you, because it's not immediately obvious what he's saying or talking about. Even if I'm wrong about it, it just helps to have guidance on his way of thinking, which is very difficult to deal with it, because it's not straight argument like most philosophers. It's very poetic and literary the way he writes.
Right. In this bit, he talks about, I like the way he wrote this. I just don't get what he's talking about. And he again questions where the drive for truth could have come from. And he's like, the fatal curiosity, which might one day have the power to peer out and down through a crack in the chamber of consciousness. and then suspect that man is sustained in the indifference of his ignorance by that which is pitiless, greedy, insatiable, and murderous. What is he talking about? As if hanging in dreams on the back of a tiger. I don't know what the hell he's talking about there. What's he?
This is, yeah, it's a weird one. What does man actually know about himself? Is he indeed able to labor himself complete, perceive himself completely, and lock the rep before the power to peer out and down through the crackage. Like he's saying in a way that once you discover it, it seems to me he's saying it's a fatal curiosity. If you peer into consciousness and then suspect that man is sustained by indifference, like imagine he comes to realize that there's an absolute indifference. He doesn't care about his indifference.
What do you mean? Like a person is indifferent and he doesn't care? But isn't that
the philosopher he's talking about?
So the philosopher is indifferent?
Or if you...
Or is he talking about the average man who is in the indifference of his ignorance by that which is so ignorance of the other philosophers? So the man is sustained in the indifference by his ignorance of these other philosophers. I don't really know what he's talking about.
I'll just move on from that because I think it's a bit confusing for me to read. Yeah, I would just say he's trying to get at, like, well, there's an illusion, there's indifference, and that's bad for life, or it's not good, or it's not admirable. So he's saying, so where does the drive for truth come from if it seems like all people want to do is lie? It's like, what's the point? Why does anybody care about the truth if it seems like even these people don't seem to care?
And then, okay, here's his less positive view on what his conclusion on why we do, drive for truth. He's saying from boredom and necessity, man wishes to exist socially. And with that, like, okay, therefore he needs to make peace and strive accordingly to banish from his world at least the most vagrant, whatever that is. I translated into war of all against all from Hobbes.
Yeah. Oh, that's Hobbes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just saying, like, most people seem to use reason for this. Like, it's just a way to maintain order. It's not very admirable. It's just what people do. Good or bad, it's just what they do.
Maybe he's talking about rationalization, but it's hard to know because, like, I'm like, where does he even get this from? This perspective. So this peace treaty brings in its wake something which appears to be the first step towards acquiring that puzzling truth drive, to wit, that which will count as truth from now on is established. That is to say, a uniformly valid and binding designation is invented for things, and this legislation of language likewise establishes the first laws of truth. So, right, it does seem like he's talking about agreed upon designations almost democratically, by the will of the people. And I think so. He was writing in the 1800s, I think, right? And I think before him, you did have, what was it? The social theory of rights. And so I don't know if that influenced him, like the general will of the people being democratic and so I'm not sure if that's where he comes up with this idea that words are just designations.
Yeah, I think he's saying that even like language itself, like it's been developed just to get along with the world, because people do have this general feeling they just want to maintain themselves against other individuals. So you just do what works or whatever is socially manageable by the herd. Just the concepts that they tell themselves it's like a structure they build that everybody follows because it's easier. That we can all follow these rules because they're established and they're uniform,
Prevent
and
war of
we all
all
know what
against
is.
all.
Yeah. So it's just like, oh, it's just a way to keep order. Like moralities would be like that too. Like they're rules that we tell. It's a structure we build as a society just so we can all get along. And that's what most people
Struck.
seem to do. Like the way you
Right.
think about society.
So he's
Like
he's putting it as truth, and that just simply means what others agree to, in
whatever the
his view,
moral
because
order
concepts are
is.
arbitrary.
Yeah. So people, at least, like it could be the Christian view of morality, and that declares what how people act and rule and act together. In
Right.
a way, it's like an informal law. Like the
Right.
language even conforms our thinking.
Okay.
So he's
Let's.
trying to find the origin in this, and like the drive for truth seems to be related to language, or language is a big consideration.
What is this part? What did I? Okay. So he talks about men who avoid the liar. Not so much are not concerned by being defrauded as much as being harmed by means of fraud. So they're not so worried about the liar himself, but they are worried about being. I didn't quite get that
Just what he
distinction.
did. Like he doesn't care about what lying. They just don't. They just don't like what he did. It's like, you're mean to me. Like that's not nice. He doesn't care if he
Well,
lied. That's like, you stole from me or whatever. Like
okay. I get it. So it's more the harm, and they don't care about the fraud. They care about the
yeah,
harm. Got it.
yeah. It's
Okay,
not the lie, but the harm.
got it. I understand that. Okay, and I didn't get this. It is in a similarly restricted sense that man now wants nothing but the truth. He desires the pleasant, life-preserving. It's interesting that he says life-preserving
Yep.
consequences of truth. He's indifferent towards pure knowledge, which has no consequences, towards those truths which are possibly harmful and destructive. He's even hostilely inclined. What is he? I'm not really sure what.
I think he's saying, in the one sense, they don't care about the deception; they just care about the harm. In another sense, they're not. They only want these pleasant, life-preserving consequences of truth. It's not the truth per se, but the consequence, or just the pleasantness that we might get if we. So he's kind of introducing like a tension there. Like on the one hand, they seem to only care about the fraud or the harm. In another sense, they seem to also care about how it impacts their life.
Okay.
So it's like a tension there. Like, so they're like caught between a rock and a hard place, I guess.
I don't really follow this. Like, what's the significance of this observation that people may? I mean, I guess it gets into it later, but I'm not really following this.
It's more like they're just caught between two ideas. Like they could go either direction, but they don't really know what they're thinking about. It's just they're in a contradictory place. There's even cognitive dissonance in a way. Like
They
there are
only
two
want
beliefs.
positive truths,
Yeah.
but they're lying
So
to themselves.
yeah.
Hmm.
It's just there's a tension in individuals. That individuals seem to want both things. They don't care about the truth, but then they do. At the same time, it seems like it's contradictory for them to do that. So he's seeing some value in that. That people do.
Okay. Okay, we'll just move on anyway. I'm not. I still don't
Yeah.
really follow. Um, what's your take on this? I get the forgetfulness. By the way, Borges or Jorge
Yeah.
says the same thing
Yeah.
of, you know, uh, to abstract is to forget differences. But to possess truth, if you'll not be satisfied with truth in the form of tautology, I'm not sure what he means there. That is to say, if you'll not be content with empty husks, unless he's talking about Aristotle's laws of logic or something, then he will always exchange truth for illusions. What is this?
If he will not be satisfied with, if he's not satisfied with tautologies, like, I don't know, an apple's an apple. It's like, it's self-referential. It doesn't tell you anything about anything.
Well, A is A. That's Aristotle's laws of logic. A thing is itself.
I think that would be tautology too. Not valid. It means the way Nietzsche's saying, like, if you're not satisfied with just that, which I don't think anyone should be, there's more to reality than that, obviously. If he's not content with these ideas, then you'll exchange for illusions. So, I mean, he's claiming that he will always exchange truth for illusions if he's not satisfied with tautology.
Right. But what's the tautology the reference to? Like, just now we were talking about man using truth as a form as a convention to prevent war of all against all. And so he's saying, so by forgetfulness, you reach the point of reaching truth. I don't know, of the great just indicated. I think he's referring to this thing, this state of war of all against all, preventing that. But then what is, if you'll not be satisfied with truth in the form of tautology, what's the truth in the form of tautology? That's what I'm not, like, what is he, there's a context here which is not, do you know what, would you know what it is?
So that weird truth can only be attained through forgetting, he's saying, like, that thing that used to didn't make sense. Like, you can only get that by forgetting. And
by forgetting, as in just keep, like, not thinking about it.
Probably. It's a bit vague.
It is vague.
I mean, he's just saying that he's trying to claim that these people brings them to just, they always want the illusion. They always seek the illusion. I'll just keep moving on. I don't think that's...
Question. It seems like, there's a difference between reading someone like this and, I don't know, Socrates, or also Plato, Socrates, and Rand. You can take it almost seems like you can almost take what you want from this.
Yes.
Okay.
A lot of Nietzsche is like that, I think, unfortunately. So it's a lot of reading Nietzsche is all about interpretation. I mean, it's not necessarily great just for distinct or very clear philosophical arguments, but it can be interesting for bringing up questions. Let's see. Well, this is more the interesting part. I think he's saying inferences from nerve stimuli to a cause outside of us.
Where you look, the thing I highlighted. Okay, by the way, I don't know if you can tell the subtle difference in shadings is yours and mine. Mine is brighter and yours was cool. All right.
This is more the relevant stuff now, I think. Less that weird argument. It's very confusing prior to this, but
I didn't get that bit. The principle.
Well, he's acknowledging that
inference from nerve stimulus to a cause outside of us is already the result. What does that mean? What is he talking about?
Well, nerve stimulus being just sensation or perception.
Yeah.
And inferring from that to a cause is already the result of he's always saying you can't really make inferences from sensation about the truth of things. Like, we're already lying to ourselves, he's saying, if we're trying to say we're making inferences from our perception.
Yeah, I don't know why, unless, okay.
And the more abstract it is, the more of a lie it is. That's what he's claiming.
But isn't that a like tipping his hat and bowing to Kant though? That there's a thing in itself. That's what I thought he was talking about. Is like he buys into that, but then just goes, well, you make up what you want. And talks about like concepts being a spider web hanging over a flowing river.
Yeah, he's just saying it. This pure reason doesn't exist. That it's not true. The pure reason or things in themselves just don't exist. He's saying there is no truth to find. It's there. It doesn't exist in it.
Sorry, you got cut off. He's saying there's no truth.
Yeah, he's saying there's no absolute truth.
Okay.
He's saying that there is none. Whatever Kant thinks, it's just Kant is lying to himself too. It never exists and doesn't exist.
What's the principle of sufficient reason?
I think with just one sum, you only need one. It's enough of a reason to prove something true. Like, I don't know if you said the ground is wet. That's sufficient reason to say it's raining. And he was saying, well, no, it's like that. It's like, well, no, it's not enough to say that, or that we do that only just by an unprincipled use of sufficient reason. That we just lie to ourselves when we say, like, oh, we can make inferences from our perception. And we say, no, that's your reasoning is bad. He doesn't talk about the reasons. He's just saying that we tend to do it by lying to ourselves or creating these stupid reasons or no good reasons.
Okay, I think I see what he's saying. So he's saying that we get nerve stimulus, but to then infer that there is a world that exists outside of us that is causing this stimulus apart from us is not.
Or that we can't know the cause. That we can't say we know the cause. Okay. You can say there's causes, but he's saying you can't know it, like sort of uncertain.
Right.
They say there's pure, found the truth. That's what he's denying.
Oh, sorry. Have we gone? Let me just stop.